The African Israelite Justice Foundation is not your usual legal practice. You see, we focus primarily on cases involving injustice against African Israelite groups or injustice against individuals because he or she identifies as an African Israelite or an Israelite of African descent. In other words, we are not a general legal practice. Instead, we specialize on African Israelite cases. And also, family, please keep in mind, we are a brand new organization, not affiliated with any existing organizations. However, it is our hope to establish connections with all African Israelite groups and people here in the States and around the world. Family, we need to hear your stories of injustice so that we can begin to record, investigate, and identify the enemies of Israel hiding behind the veil, and then ultimately hold them accountable in a court of law. And as stated before, we are a brand new organization with limited funds, and we are in the process of expanding our resources to further enhance our legal team who will litigate our cases. And if you would like to join this historic cause, please share this message all over social media. Spread this message of IsraeliteJustice.org worldwide. And get this message from Kyrie to Kanye, from Whoopi Goldberg to Nick Cannon. And also share your stories of injustice or donate to the cause. And if you so choose to, you can remain anonymous and let us do all the work. After all, that's what the Israelite Justice Foundation is here for. We are here to fight for your right to be Israel. As always, thank you in advance. We appreciate you and love you, Israel. Take care, family. Shalom.
Well, you got him down, man. Let him breathe, at least, man. I've been trying to help out. So you breathe a little bit more. Man. One of my homies guys breathe back.
Apparently the cold weather is setting in, and that means more people will be indoors and there is more chance of coronavirus to spread. And in recent days, we now know from the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation at the University of Washington.
More than 30% of Americans have not made their full housing payments for July, including 19% who made no housing payments at all.
Now to the wildfires raging in the West, which have killed at least 33 people, with dozens of others missing and tens of thousands more forced to flee their homes in California, Oregon, and Washington.
Australia is on fire.
The coronavirus has claimed a Ukrainian passenger plane.
Violent clashes between Hindus and Muslims.
The economy is facing its biggest crisis.
A Pakistan International airline.
Worst plague of locusts.
2 weeks after George Floyd was
India's disputed border.
The Jews. The Jews are composed of 3 or 4 separate racial elements. The Asiatic Negroid strain shows itself occasionally with the curly hair, the long eye, and proportions of the skull. The Jewish hybrids with the Negro in Jamaica and Guyana reproduce most strikingly the Assyrian type. You see, Jews were called Negro, which is the Spanish and Portuguese word for black. Both Spanish and Portuguese Jews were called black Jews. For example, in this quote it reads, King John II in 1492 expelled all the Jews to the island of St. Thomas, which had been discovered in 1471, and to other Portuguese settlements on the continent of Africa. And from these banished Jews, the black Portuguese, as they are called. It reads, thus the black color is found not only in individuals, as the black Jews of Portugal. And it reads, "'Tis also a vulgar error that the Jews are all black, for this is only true of the Portuguese Jews, who marrying always among one another, beget children like themselves, and consequently the swarthiness of their complexion is entailed upon their whole race, even in the northern regions." Now notice how first-hand accounts line up with Bible verses such as Lamentations chapter 5 verse 10, where it reads, "Our skin is black like an oven because of the terrible famine." Now, not only did Europeans refer to the Jews as black, Arabs also referred to the Jews as black. Now, the Arab word for black is referred to as Sudan. S-U-D-A-N. The following references read, the Arabic word for blacks is Sudan. And then the reference at the bottom reads, they call it Balad Sudan, which means land of the blacks. Sudan is the Arabic word for black person. Now notice that Sudan is spelled two different ways. S-U-D-A-N is the modern day spelling. However, the antiquity spelling was S-O-U-D-A-N, So-U-Dan, which is simply two words combined into one, So-U-Dan. Now, let's use Google Translate to look up the meaning of the words So-U-Dan. Now, we will use Hausa language, which is located in the So-U-Dan, to translate the word Udan. Now, let's take a quick look at the Hebrew meaning of the words so, Yudan. After all, Hebrew is the native tongue of the Jews. To do this, we will start with Strong's Concordance H5471. That's Strong's word H5471, which is so. And if we look at the definition of the word so, it reads of foreign origin. That's of foreign origin. And if we put that together, we look at the Hebrew translation. So means foreigner or of foreign origin. And Yudan equals Judah, which is H3063, which represents the southern kingdom. And if you put the two together, you get foreigners of Judah. So on our map, we have So Yudan, which in Hebrew represents the foreigners of Judah. Now, let's cross-check our Google translation findings using additional references. For example, the index in the back of the Talmud, Volume 3, reads, Yudan, a variant of Judah in the 4th century. And our next reference reads, Yudan equals Judah. Now, let's take a look at additional references to see exactly who lived in the So Yudan. The Jews. The Jews of So Yudan are, according to my informers, divided into many large and small tribes, with whose names they are unacquainted. Their mode of life in some countries is pastoral. But the towns are filled with traders and artificers of that faith, who gain a substance at their several employments in the service of the Muslims, under whose government they live as vassals. This in reference to Mr. Bodwich's kingdom of Yehudi. I may be permitted to say is the only state of society in which that oppressed nation is suffered to live, and the tribes without security in their possessions, without public revenue or arms, are hourly exposed to insult and rampant form of blind zeal, and active bigotry by which their lords are animated in those countries. The lands occupied by those people cover a wide extent between Messina and Kabi. They are said to be mingled also with the Upper Fula tribes, eastward of Timbuktu, and in many parts of Meroe. They have inheritance or are employed as artificers in the cities and towns. As we live among the heathens, says Bashar, so do the Jews in Meroe and Fulani with our brethren, but they are not esteemed like us. For they are a people hardened in their sins and obstinate in their fidelity. The anger of Yah is upon them, and therefore are they given to the rule of the Muslims. The Arab Bashar goes on to describe the Jews as brown colored instead of the black color of the Ashanti. The Arabic word So Yudan and the word Negro, which is the Portuguese and Spanish word for black, were bywords that were used to describe the Jews or the house or tribe of Judah. Now, this was foretold in Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 37, where it reads, And thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all nations, whither Yah shall lead thee. Now, we will discuss another byword for the Jews, or for the house of Judah. It's one of the more controversial bywords. It's a byword that today causes hurt and pain and often great sadness. However, this controversial byword can be used to identify the true identity of the so-called African American today. The byword is spelled N-I-G-G-E-R. It was a byword used to identify slaves that were captured in the Niger Delta region. However, Niger is a relatively modern pronunciation of the word. During the time of antiquity, it was pronounced nigger. Now, the New World Encyclopedia tells us that the Portuguese arrived at the Niger Delta on the coast in 1473. By the 17th century, coastal trade had supplanted the trans-Saharan trade, mostly dealing in slaves. During the years when the slave trade flourished, nearly half the total number of slaves exported from Africa came from the Niger Delta, which came to be known as the Slave Coast. Next, let's read about the people that were taken as slaves who lived in the Niger River region. This next reference comes from John Ogilvie of London, who was the official cosmographer and geographic printer of King Charles. And it reads, "Many Jews also are scattered over this region, some natives boasting themselves of Abraham's seed, inhabiting both sides of the river Niger." Others are Asian strangers who fled thither either from the desolation of Jerusalem by Vespasian or from Judea, wasted and depopulated by the Romans, Persians, Saracens, and Christians, or else such came out of Europe, whence they were banished out of parts of Italy in the year 1342, out of Spain in the year 1462, out of the Low Countries in 1350, out of France in 1403, out of England in 1422. These all differ in habit and are divided into several tribes, having no dominion, though both wealthy and numerous, but despised of all nations, and so abominated by the Turks that they are not permitted to be Mohammedans unless first baptized, and then no otherwise made use of than to receive their customs and to gather their taxes. Skipping to the bottom paragraph, it reads, "The idolaters are numerous in Negro land, upper and lower Ethiopia, and towards the great ocean, except, as we hinted before, some few who by the industry of the Portuguese and the Spain have been converted and baptized in several places." In case you're wondering, who are these black Jews living in the Niger River Delta region on the west coast of Africa? We need look no further than another book authorized by the official cosmographer and geographic printer of King Charles himself. This comes from a book called America, An Accurate Description of the New World by John Ogilvie. On page 574, it reads that John III, King of Portugal, sent a colony thither above 200 years before, whom though the unwholesome air destroyed, yet the place was not left desolate. For he sent new inhabitants, who first settled Guinea, next in Angola, and lastly on the island of St. Thomas, that so they might be better used to the air. That the said king sold all those Jews for slaves that refused to embrace the Roman religion, and caused their children to be baptized, from whom, coming thither in great numbers, most of the present inhabitants were descended. So according to John Ogilvie of London, the children of the Jews that refused to embrace the Roman religion were placed on the west coast of Africa in great numbers, most of which the present inhabitants were descended. In being baptized, a mark was placed on their hands and on their foreheads. As we read, the cardinal that was to obfuscate being come with the canons of that church. The ceremony was begun with blessing the water. After the proselytes, presented by their godfathers, advanced everyone in his turn and declared their desire to be baptized, then they leaned over the front. The cardinal baptized them, pouring water on their foreheads out of a large silver spoon, and gave them their names. According to the cosmographer and geographic printer of the king, along with additional references, the black Portuguese and Spanish Jews were placed on the west coast of Africa in great numbers. Now, let's look at additional references to see why the Jews were placed on the west coast of Africa. The Jews and Moors in Spain, page 214, and it reads, "The king's creed awoke again simultaneously with the reawakening of his greed. He issued an edict which threw even that of Torquemada in the shade. All Jewish children below 14 years of age were torn from their parents' arms, dragged into the church, baptized. Those under 3 years of age were given to Christians to receive a Christian education, or in other words, to be raised as slaves. Those between 3 and 10 years of age were put on board of a ship, conveyed to the newly discovered unwholesome island of St. Thomas, called the Isles of Perdition, which was colonized by Portuguese condemned criminals, or Portuguese Jews, condemned by the Inquisition, to fare there as best they could. Those between 10 and 14 years were sold as slaves. Then indeed the cup of their affliction was full to the brim. It was a stern truth in which Lemieux uttered when he said, "The Jews have experienced fully the unequal skill of the church in administering pain. Mothers cast themselves at the feet of the tyrants and pitifully begged to be taken with their babies. They were heartlessly thrust aside. Hundreds of mothers, mad with despair, ran behind the ships as they carried off the idols of their heart and perished in the waves. The serene fortitude which the exiled people had borne so many and such grievous calamities gave way at last and was replaced by the wildest paroxysms of despair. Piercing shrieks of anguish filled the land. Childless and heartbroken and brokenhearted, they now sought to leave the land, but they were told that they had forfeited their right, and they were given the choice between baptism and slavery. Thousands, after enduring all that they did, after leaving the beloved Spain and all their wealth and ease, submitted to baptism now, in the hope of being reunited with their children. Thousands were sold as slaves. Yet, prior to being sold, they were submitted to tortures, cruelties, outrageous too revolting, too repulsive, too heart-rending to be here narrated. Now, to pause here just for a moment, just keep in mind that these were black Portuguese and Spanish Jews. as the previous references have pointed out. All right, as we continue, terror seized upon the native Portuguese Jews when they helplessly beheld the cruelties to which their Spanish brethren were subjected. They knew then themselves could not escape the wrath of the church much longer. They thought of flight, and well had it been for them had they made their escape then. While they were making secret preparations, John II died, 1495. He had been afflicted on the very day when the ships laden with the Jewish exile children set sail for the isle of the condemned criminals with a strange, painful malady, and had lingered ever since. So King John II, who shipped the children of the Jews to the west coast of Africa, became sick the very day that the ships departed from Portugal. Let's keep reading. It says, his own promising son and successor preceded him into the grave. His cousin Manuel ascended the throne. He was the counterpart of his predecessor, kind-hearted, a promoter of learning, eager to further the interests of his country by discoveries abroad and by commerce at home. Immediately he disenfranchised the Jewish exiles sold into slavery, promised to recall the condemned children, and issued an edict in which he commanded kind treatment to the Jews and prohibited accusations against them. In their great joy, the native Portuguese Jews sent an embassy to him, offering him large sums of money voluntarily as a token of their gratitude. The king thanked them, reassured them of his goodwill, but refused to be paid for human kindness. But again had destiny decreed that a woman was to play an ignoble part in the tragic history of the Jews. A marriage was proposed between Manuel of Portugal and the daughter of Ferdinand and Isabel of Spain. Manuel was rejoiced with the proposal. Already he saw himself in the near future king of united Spain and Portugal, and of the entire New World. But Satan stepped between, dipped his pen in gall, in writing the marriage contract, demanded as one of the conditions the immediate expulsion from Portugal of all the Jews, both natives, which is the Portuguese, and exiles, which were the Spanish. The king hesitated. The fanatical daughter of the fanatical parents persisted. Argument made her more vehement. Torquemada might as well be proud of his pupil. The possession of vast empires and of the most powerful crown of Europe tempted, and the temper conquered. He had purchased his right to the princess of Spain at a sacrifice of thousands and thousands of lives, and with the destruction of the very pillars of his nation's prosperity. On the 30th of November, 1497, the marriage contract was signed. And on the 20th of the following month appeared the edict of the expulsion of the Jews from Portugal. The scene of mourning and wailing, heartrending cries which resounded in Spain re-echoed in Portugal, only the more painful because of the terrible knowledge that they had since acquired of the meaning of the word expulsion. Manuel soon regretted his signing away his most industrious, most intelligent, and most prosperous citizens, but the marriage contract held him fast, and the Spanish queen kept a watchful eye on him, and Torquemada upon both. The prospective vast empire and Spanish crown still dazzled his eyes. He planned a strategy. He thought he could force the parents to embrace Christianity and to remain if he once succeeded in getting all their children into his power and into the Christian faith. He gave secret orders for the repetition of the atrocious crime of having all children under 14 years of age, seized from their mother's bosom and father's arm, dispersed through the kingdom to be baptized, and brought up as Christians. The secret became known. Portugal again re-echoed the wails of stricken ones. Frantic mothers threw their children into deep wells or rivers. Mothers were known to take their babies from their breast and tear them limb from limb, rather than resign them to Christians. They would rather know the bodies of their children in the grave and their released spirit in heaven than have them adopt a faith into which Satan sent his friends. With all the parents' opposition, the king's order was executed. Many accepted baptism, but not enough to please the king, and to wreak vengeance upon them for thwarting his wishes, he revoked his edict, seized all who had not yet fled, and sold them for slaves. What happened to the children? What happened to the children? What became of the children of these rebellious Jews that refused to embrace the Roman religion? What became of the children of the Jews that sacrificed their lives, and in some cases their children, to make a stand for the laws, statutes, and commandments and their beliefs in the Most High? What became of those children? In order to answer this question, we need to look no further than the ones who enslaved the children themselves. But we first need to understand that the Jews of Spain and Portugal claim their descent from the tribe of Judah. As the following reference reads, it says, the Spanish and the Portuguese Jews claim their descent from the tribe of Judah. And with that in mind, the slavers who took the children and carried the children to the west coast of Africa named the place that they sent the children after the children. On the west coast of Africa, the Portuguese slavers named the slave coast the Kingdom of Judah. And the next reference also confirms that the children that were taken to the west coast of Africa resided in the Kingdom of Judah. As the following quote reads, it reads, Judah or Judah is a city old, frequented since the 16th century by the Portuguese slavers who gave it its name. Its inhabitants were said to be Judaic, and they were indeed considered as a remnant of the scattered tribes of Israel. And the next quote reads, east of the Great Popo begins the Dahomey territory, guarded by the important town of Gliwice, known to Europeans by various names of Fida, Hueda, Wida, Wida. The old writers called it Judah, and its inhabitants were said to be Jews, while the neighboring river, Alala, whose real name was Ephraim, during the flourishing days of the slave coast, from 16 to 18,000 were annually transported from Judah, as the Portuguese call this place? All right, so let's do a brief recap of what we've learned so far. We learned that the Portuguese shipped the children of the rebellious house of Judah, or the tribe of Judah, who refused to embrace the Roman religion. These children were sent or shipped to the west coast of Africa in great numbers. We also learned that the Portuguese named the place that they sent the children of the house or tribe of Judah to. These Portuguese named the place after the children. They named the place the Kingdom of Judah. And we also learned that these children were raised to be Christians and to be slaves. Now, let's cross-check our findings using additional references. Now, previous references show the king of Portugal taking all the children of the rebellious house or tribe of Judah from the ages of 14 years of age and younger to be raised as Christians and slaves. However, additional references show this age was later increased to children in their 20s. For example, in this reference, the Jews of Spain and Portugal and the Inquisition, it reads, "A fresh edict went forth that all the children between the ages of 14 and 20 should also be taken from their parents and baptized, and multitudes were dragged forcibly by their hair and by their arms into the churches and compelled to receive the waters of baptism, together with new names, being afterwards given over to those who undertook to instruct them in the Christian faith." All right. As always, family, thank you for taking the time to watch and share these videos. And thank you to those who continue to support this platform through your donations and Patreon support. And as always, thank you to those who continue to lift me and my family and the whole house of Israel up in your thoughts and prayers. And may the Most High Yah bless those who bless Israel and curse those who curse Israel. And with that, family, Shalom.